always great to bring in our next guest, Dave Dulio. He's a professor of political science and the director over at the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. 2021, starting off just pretty much like 2020 ended. Professor, great to have you with us.
Nice. Thanks for having me.
So we haven't heard a lot from former President Trump. However, he's not going away.
He is not. He's going to use the channels that he has available to him. And I say that, of course, because Twitter and Facebook have banned him. He just has fewer avenues to go right to the public these days, but that will not keep him quiet, that's for sure.
I will say, I know that our politicians are, advocate, especially the Democrats, about the impeachment trial. We all know that there were not going to be enough votes in the Senate to convict him, and then we have to also remember it's not a court of law. So even convicted him, the word conviction, we just think of a law procedure, and that's not what happened. But we knew the Senate wasn't going to vote to impeach him. So it's kind of like, are we wasting time and money when we should be focused on other things?
Sure, I think you make several really good points there, and let's start with what I think is, well, hopefully we won't have to do this too often in the future, right? But to reference impeachment trials. And I just broke my own rule there by calling it a trial, because I think we do ourselves a disservice when we talk about these things, and we've done it for a year plus, right? When we use terms that are normally associated with court proceedings, trial, conviction, acquittal, right? Impeachments are not a judicial process. They are a political process. No laws have to be broken for there to be an impeachment. And I'm not saying that either one of those was the case in this last time, right? But we can slip into thinking that these things are judicial or legal or what we would see in a courtroom, right? And they're absolutely not. It's political theater at some level. So your point about was it a waste of time, right? Well, that depends who you ask, obviously. But I think even some Democrats would probably admit to that. And it's maybe for a reason that they want to, frankly, move on themselves and not detract from President Biden's agenda and moving that legislatively. Although, and maybe we can talk about this too, right? He hasn't used the legislative process very much, if at all, thus far in his presidency, right? Executive orders have been coming seemingly by the dozens, but he is going to need Congress to do some things, right? First off the top is that COVID relief bill. And the more time that's spent on impeachment, the less time can be spent legislating. So I think even Democrats want to get past it and get on to things that they want to accomplish, right? And I think that was on display when they decided not to have witnesses, right? Everybody knew the outcome. And even the Democrats kind of said, okay, we know what's going to happen here. Let's not, quote unquote, waste any more time. We'll dispense with the witnesses. Let's just vote on this thing and we'll get rolling.
Biden, in my opinion, I think he's played it smart by not getting into the war of words when it comes to the impeachment. For his part, I'm focused on other things. I'm not even watching it. Pretty smart on his side, I think.
Oh, no doubt about it, right? I mean, he is going to be judged and is being judged right now on his attention to the economy, to COVID, to vaccinations, et cetera, right? I mean, it is, the White House does not need to be caught up in anything Trump at this point, right? They were smart to do that and stay out of the political fray and the political theater that we had that wrapped up over the weekend.
Yeah, I think Biden's soundbite was even just that. I'm tired of talking about Trump.
Yep.
So, hey, with that, he is going out right now, and it is now time to sell this, huge COVID relief bill. And he's really, one of the first places he'll be kicking it off here in the state of Michigan over at the Pfizer plant on the western part of the state. But, the vaccination rollout is still a hot mess.
It's been clunky, right? And I think that part of that is it's hard to do it. It's a tough job. And that applies to President Biden and President Trump, right? I mean, the Biden White House is finding out things that they didn't know, they didn't have under control when they came in. It's a hard thing to do, right? I think they oversold what they could do. And that we'll see if that comes back to haunt them in any, with any political consequences. I doubt it, but even some of the messaging on it, whether it's vaccinations in schools, I've had to walk that back a little bit. The number of vaccinations that they want to get into arms in the next couple of months, right? They've had to adjust that, because he had set at the start 100 million doses in the first 100 days. Well, it turns out that even before he got into office, vaccinations were above 1 million people per day. So they didn't have to do much to hit that mark, right? And they're going to beat that because production of the vaccine has increased. More doses are going to get out to states. More doses are going to get out to pharmacies and other places that will do those vaccinations in addition to hospitals, et cetera.
I'm really interested to see how things change here in the state of Michigan because there are so many close ties to Biden. Obviously, Governor Whitmer. Now we have Dr. Calhoun is going to be a part of the Biden administration's task force. And then we had Mayor Duggan, of course, go to the White House this past week to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine rollout in the city of Detroit. So are we going to see things improve? Because right now, we're really not. And there's conflicting information, too, because Governor Whitmer is the one who closed down the schools. And there were lawsuits to try to reopen them. And then, just like that, once Biden gets elected, reopen all the schools. So I think people at this point in time are really starting to say, okay, maybe politics really are at play here.
Politics is everywhere. I think if we assume that, we won't be disappointed.
Right. So, oh my God, you need to make that into a shirt.
Yes. I cannot imagine that I'm the first person to say that. But if I am, I want that copyrighted, right? But that's just a fact. I mean, we can assume that our leaders are altruistic and they're always looking out for the best interest of the public. There's politics everywhere. It's a fact, right? And I think you're starting to see that with the Biden administration and the debate over schools, right? The debate about vaccine rollout, because let me start with that one, right? We heard early on in the Biden administration that there was no vaccination plan that was left by the Trump administration. Well, Dr. Fauci countered that. Dr. Fauci said that wasn't true, right? So they're trying to walk this line of being able to take credit, which is smart politically, right? Being able to take credit for things that are happening under their watch. But sometimes the messaging is clunky. And the same thing can be said about the COVID and school reopenings. The press secretary has said something different than what the president said last night about what the goal is for what these schools are. And of course, and it's not happening, at least as far as I can tell, here in Michigan, like it is in other places like Chicago, where the battle with the teachers unions is raging, right? And parents are just up in arms, and there's the clip that went viral from Virginia a couple weeks ago, right, with the frustrated parent at the school board meeting. Just Google that one if you're listening out there and haven't seen it. So it's becoming politically difficult, I would say.
You know what? I will say one thing that I kind of wonder if this is going to happen. So I remember covering the Detroit City Council back in the day. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like you said, it was a great show just to go sit in the city council meeting, because you never knew what was going to happen or what was going to be said. Same thing with the school board meetings. There would be food flying. I mean, it was just crazy. So when Mayor Duggan came into office, and we will say there are a lot of politics behind the scenes that people don't really understand or realize. They didn't all of a sudden just get along. It was, get along, or you money to this project, or this project's not going to be there any longer. So they were boring to start going to. I was like, I can't even tell you today who sits on the Detroit City Council, because they're not just near as fun to watch. And I wonder if that's going to happen with our politics now without Trump in office.
Well, and that I've read, and you've read the same stories that I have, right? About how we're returning to quote unquote normal, or politics is boring now. And it certainly isn't as entertaining, but it might be better.
Right. You know what? At the end of the day, I was actually going to put this tweet out today, and then I was like, wouldn't it be nice if our elected leaders made their decision based on us, the taxpayers, and not their dedication to their parties? Because look what is happening to the Republicans that went against the party.
Well, I assume you mean the censoring that we see, or not censoring, censuring maybe Representative Meyer or Representative Upton or others across the country, right, who've voted for impeachment or voted for, and we're going to violate that rule again that we talked about, conviction in the Senate, right? And I think that really speaks to the Trump movement over the last 4 years, because those kinds of political moves are happening because it's Trump supporters and folks from that sort of Trump wing of the Republican Party who are now in control of those grassroots party organizations like county parties, congressional district party organizations, right, where they have maybe a majority on the board or a majority of the members, or and those maybe traditional Republicans or establishment Republicans are not as influential as they used to be.
It's going to be interesting to see how the GOP party tries to either bring itself together or realign its messaging to the public, because right now it does appear, not only on a national level, but here, on a state level in Michigan, that they are a fractured party right now.
Oh, there's no doubt, and it's not going to be a quick fix, or there's not a quick answer to the question of where does the GOP go from here. It's going to take years for that to get figured out, for them to find equilibrium, and there's not an easy answer to what Republicans do from here. I mean, they have really this sort of, they're at this fork in the road. Do they continue down the path that Donald Trump created, that helped blaze that path, right? Where there's no doubt that Donald Trump brought new people into the Republican Party that had not voted Republican in the past. And that helped him get 76 or 78, however many 70 million votes that he got in November. We forget that, right? He lost, but he got a lot of votes. We're still a 50-50 country. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, by messaging to those individuals, he lost some support that Republicans had previously, right? In suburban areas like Oakland County, suburban areas like Kent County, right? Trump did worse in those places than previous Republicans. So does the Republican Party, do they continue down that Trump path, or do they tack a little bit differently, try to come back to what they used to be, and maybe get some of those folks who are inclined to vote Republican but just didn't like Trump. Can they get those folks back? Now, if they can do both, Republicans are in good shape. But that's going to be a tough needle to thread over the next couple of years through 2022 and certainly into 2024.
Dave Dulio with us here on the MegaCast. He's a professor of political science and director for the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. You're also a professor, other than just being a regular visitor here with us on the MegaCast, and we always appreciate having you with us. But I do, what is the perspective from some of your students right now? Because it seems like it's a crazy time politically, but it's also a fascinating time to be on the sidelines and study what's happening in our politics.
It is. And I think that there's more interest in American politics, more interest in political science on campus, because there's been such tumult in the last 4 years. There's been new issues, new questions, certainly different situations where we say, "Boy, I never thought I'd see that," right, in politics. And I think that generates interest. I'll be honest with you, it's tough to get a read on sort of where college kids are these days, because I don't see them. I don't talk to them as much as I would if we were able to meet in person, right? I'm online this semester because my classes are too big for us to be in a room that we can be socially distant. So, we have to do everything through, in this way. So it's if you ask me this in a semester where I was on campus and regularly interacting in a personal level with students, I'd have a much different answer for you. I look forward to the day when I can give you that answer.
Dave Dulio joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast. He is the professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. And Dave, just to circle back to the rift within the Republican Party, because it has seemed throughout the Trump impeachment, the second Trump impeachment, that there was kind of wavering there from those at the top of the party, people like Mitch McConnell, people like Lindsey Graham, who were saying, yeah, we don't love what Trump did here, but we also want to have his back, but we also don't like him and don't want this to be the party, but we also don't want to lose our supporters. Strategically for the Republican Party, it's also kind of a crossroads too, because if there's a split there, it kind of benefits the Democrats, would it not? And does that make it a little more of a situation where maybe those in the Trump Republican camp would be more inclined to level with more moderate people in the party?
Well, you'd think so, right? Because if there's a split, right, if the Republican Party splinters into two different groups that all of a sudden try to run candidates for office, that is basically handing Democrats control of all branches of government for the foreseeable future. I don't see any other way where that doesn't happen. Simply because, as I said, we're this 50-50 country. But if you take that one of those 50s and split it up, Democrats win pretty easily, pretty handily. So I think that most Republicans understand that and are going to try to work to not let that splintering happen. But there may be some hardliners who want to try and say, look, we're not about politics, we're about principle. We believe in these issues and these policy solutions, and winning elections be damned. That would be it's certainly plausible. Whether it's likely, I think, remains to be seen. But even on the other side too, there were reports a week or so ago about how maybe 100 or so Republicans met to talk about trying to form a centrist party. Well, that would be interesting, but what that would take is getting those moderate Democrats who voted for Joe Biden, who voted for Barack Obama, to get them to come and join that movement, right? Democrats aren't going to want to let that happen, right? So there could be this battle, sort of for the ideological center, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I really feel like independents throughout this time, they've lost their voice because you have people on the far left and they're very passionate about their views, and you have people on the far right and they feel the same way. And when you're an independent in the middle, both of those sides are not willing to listen to you as an independent person. And when you try to ask them questions, then it's defensive. So if these political parties can really come after that independent person, I mean, we hear about the independents every election time, but outside of around election time, who cares about us?
Well, that's a good point, right? And I think that some folks who call themselves independents may be getting to the point where they're sick and tired of being courted every 2 or 4 years, but then not listened to once governing time comes, right? Once campaign season is over. And I think maybe that happens. But I will say, right, there's interesting evidence in polling data that has been the case for years and years and years, that a lot of folks who claim to be independents really aren't. We have at the end of 2020, the number of people who said that they were independents outpaced those who said that they were Democrats or Republicans. We're basically at a point now where 40% of the country claims to be independent or not affiliated with either of the two major parties, and 25% or so say Democrat and Republican, depending on the poll you look at, right? But if we just ask those independent folks if they lean one way or the other, where the pollster would say, well, okay, you say you're independent, but if you had to say you leaned one way or the other, would you say you lean to the Democrats or lean to the Republicans? And the vast majority of those independents all of a sudden disappear. And most of those people cop to having some partisanship, right? Where we go from just one survey question, we get 42% of the public saying they're independents. Well, after that follow-up question, it shrinks to 9 or 10%, right? So there's this debate about how many independents are there really when we boil it down to brass tacks.
And I know that my husband gets upset with me when I vote because I am truly an independent, and I know that I knock out the power of my vote by going across party lines, but I try to do my research and vote for an individual based on my beliefs and who I think might be the best person for the position. But at the end, our candidates don't do that. Once they're elected, they go party lines. So it doesn't matter if you're an independent. Whichever person you vote for is going to vote for the party.
Well, with all due respect, I would disagree with your husband and just say that you're not diluting your vote when you split your ticket, right? And now, to be fair, we see a lot less of that these days than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago, where ticket splitting has gone down, right? The folks like yourself who say, oh, I'm going to vote for this candidate from this party for president and this candidate from this party for U.S. Senate, and you go back and forth down the ballot, right? That happens less and less these days. So it's not a terrible surprise that we see sort of entrenched partisans when they get into office. Plus, those individual office holders need their party for things like committee assignments, campaign help the next time around, right? So the party can use carrots and sticks to try and extract the behavior that they want out of these elected officials.
That's a great line. That's a great analogy. I will say, though, I may have been a bad person when it comes to voting for certain people at the top of the ticket, because I just wrote in Papa for president.
Oh, no.
Because that's what I call my husband, because he's the dog's Papa. Because I was like, I can't vote for either one of these people. So I know that's terrible. And I just admitted to that publicly, too. But I'm okay with it. I'm secure in where I stand when it comes to politics, because when you've been a reporter as long as I have been, you understand that they don't care about you. They don't care about you, Tyler. They don't care about me. They care about us on Election Day.
Of course.
And I have seen politicians who have gotten into it to really want to serve. Those first-time candidates who really are true to the process and wanting to serve us in the public. And then you check back in with them a few years later. Boy, things have changed.
Well, and we see it on display right now with the COVID relief package that's being debated, right? And you had these 10 Republican senators who went to the White House for a meeting with the president, and they basically got shown the door, right? I mean, it was Democrats don't need those folks now. They don't need them. But if early on, if you're not going to reach across it, I guess I'd put it this way. There's not one thing that those 10 Republicans brought to the table that the White House couldn't agree with. They couldn't find one item to show some bipartisanship. What a better way to start off a presidency than by saying, look, I'm gonna agree with Susan Collins, or I'm gonna agree with Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and say, you know what, that is a good idea. I'm gonna take your idea and put it in over what my party wants. What a great signal that would have been. But this is gonna pass. It might get some Republican votes just because I think that there might be too much political pressure on some Republicans not to vote for it. But it could have passed, I think, in a pretty big bipartisan way. But that's not the path that the White House or the Democrats in Congress have chosen, and they can do that. Right? And I would say, look, elections have consequences. That's what we have them for. It's for the elected officials in the Congress and the White House to make policy, and they're going to do that, which they can. But I think that would it have been better if they could have forged some kind of bipartisan agreement? The president yes, the answer to my question, I'll answer it myself, is yes, I think so. But
are you thinking about running for office? Because I'll be your campaign manager.
Absolutely not. The president talked a lot about unity in his inaugural speech, which was terrific. It was a good speech, right? It was the right message at the right time in the right context, in my humble opinion. Unity for me is when people come and meet in the middle, right? That's a two-way street. That takes both sides wanting to do that. Unity and bipartisanship, and maybe those two are different things, right? It's not when one side says, all right, you got to come over this way. You got to come to me. You got to meet in the middle.
Oh, if they would only learn that. Hey, just another minute or two here with you on the show. We so appreciate your time. Professor Dulio, I have to ask you, Mike Shirkey, what is this guy thinking? Is he going to survive?
Oh, I think so. Oh, I think I don't think he resigns. I think, look, this is not the first time that a elected official, politician has had to walk back or clarify their remarks. Heck, I think the White House had to do it a couple times in the last week or so, right? Hey, we didn't say that exactly right. Shirkey's got what I think is a plausible explanation for what he meant when he said what he did. And look, are the Republicans going to kick him out? No way. Then they lose, right? Then the Democrats win. And that's another problem with our politics, right? Is that we see elected officials or party organizations do things just to keep the other side from getting an advantage, right? And it's this game of one-upspersonship or brinkspersonship or whatever you want to call it, right? And it's this that's not helpful either. So I think he survives, if only because he's going to dig his heels in, right? But again, I'm not sure why we're shocked that an elected official's got to sort of qualify, or as I said, clarify what they were talking about. This isn't the first time, won't be the last.
That is so true. Hey, quickly before we let you go, do you still believe in our political process?
Absolutely. The process that we have is terrific. The structures that were put in place by the U.S. Constitution and developed over the last 240 some years are unique. Are they the best? I think that is debatable, but it's stood the test of time.
It has, but I do believe too, lobbyists have helped taken over the process in some regards as well. But that's a conversation for another day. So we know that you have classes to teach, but again, we always appreciate having you with us here, Professor Dulio, with us over at Oakland University. Check them out, Center for Civic Engagement. About 30 seconds left. Do you guys have anything coming up? I didn't check your page this morning. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. We're going to continue our Civic Engagement Office Hours virtual series in March and April. Folks will be able to find us on the Facebook page at OUCCE for details when those are announced. When we'll have a couple other things in store for you over the next few months as well.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And we do want to remind people that some of your previous events, you do record them so people can go back and watch some of those conversations and those events, because you've had some really great ones on over the last couple of months. Professor Dulio, thank you again for your time.
Pleasure.